Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller. In this episode, from jerk to peace and healing practitioner. It's a story of drive. So on September 9th, 2024, we published a show titled Your Nervous System is Controlling You and How to Master It. And my guests were the co-authors, Jennifer Mann and Kardin Rabin. My muse was their new book. It's The Secret Language of the Body. And in our long conversation, Karden brought up the emotional cold plunge, this concept, this exercise. And I was really intrigued. So he gave me access to their community at SOMIA, SOMIA, SOMIAinternational.com. So I joined there and I went through that exercise, and I just ended up engaging in more and more that Karden specifically had done and was leading people in. And I just felt really attracted to what he was doing, and found myself though wondering, how did this guy end up doing what he was doing? So Karden, he's a this is his bio, nervous system medicine practitioner and an expert in the fields of trauma and psychophysiological disorders. Over the last 15 years, he's combined principles of bodywork, brain retraining, and somatic trauma therapies, and helped thousands of clients across the globe heal from chronic pain and illness. Well, Karden is the co-founder of SOMIA and a regular contributor to Bessel van der Kolk's Trauma Research Foundation. He's led programming for the Wounded Warrior Project and Starbucks. But what you're about to hear is his story, and it's that Karden had severe asthma. He almost died as a kid. He was really neglected as a child, often in tears, bored, and alone in his pain. And from this, up to the age of about 19 specifically, Karden says he became an asshole. That's what he says. You'll hear it in a minute. A bully. He was mean. He used cleverness and criticism like a sword. He said being a poser was his identity, and he worked to get table scraps of validation from the cool kids. He said he was good at making fun of people and getting a laugh. But then something happened, something that drove him to leave that persona. And he says he became obsessed with uncovering the physics of what drives people, himself included, and discovering, he says, the laws that no one is immune to. And today his ambition is to help as many people as possible. So I bring you the story because I think you're going to resonate with a lot of what he shares. There's the humility and vulnerability of it. And it'll help you see and understand yourself better, and how you can take your pain, heal from it as you help other people with their pain. So you can find him at Karden, Karden Rabin, Rabin. At Kardin Rabin, you'll find his website, social media, all that jazz. Hey, when I'm not having these conversations about human potential, I'm working with people on their human potential. You can find and connect with me at kevinmiller.co. Here are some sponsors who help make the show possible. Then drive with me and Kardin Rabin and his story that I titled From Jerk to Peace and Healing Practitioner, a story of drive. Let's see what we can learn for ourselves today. Karden, when we did the show with you and Jen that I just mentioned up in the intro, and I resonated with you on a few things. Obviously, the emotional cold plunge was significant. That got me into watching your videos at SOMIA International and looking at you on Instagram, and even saw some of your family pictures and whatnot. And I thought, I just found myself interested in how you got to where you are. And I think I just found you really down to earth as well. You're just as quick to make a joke and laugh as you were to talk about something really serious. And it just resonated with me. And I have a show and I can do what I want. And I wanted to know, and I think other people will find interest in what drives you. So thanks for being here again.
Oh, Kevin, thanks for having me. And you know what? I also like to do what I want. And, and like, maybe putting the cart before the horse here, like literally as you said that, and I was like skipping on stones back into time with all of sort of the, let's just say, ambition-y things that I've done in my life.
Yeah.
And at the heart of all of them is like, I want to do this. I hate have-tos. There's have-tos have been so demotivating to me. So we'll see where it goes from that. But
there's the segue right there to where I want to go. Because I would say, okay, right there, I want to know, what your trajectory was, and even that realization, if it was, or influence that you had to do what you want. I'm very clear on that. I grew up with parents who pursued what they wanted, for better or worse. I never knew them to feel drudgery towards work or to not care about what they were doing. They were always interested and excited and inspired. And even when things failed massively and we lost the house and all those crazy things, they were still doing things that they cared about. So I got that on a silver platter and realize now how rare that is. So in regards to what has driven you to this point of doing that, go back. Tell me what the early influences were and what you were interested in, because I want to take those and come up to where you are now.
So good. Now, I even think that when I went to Skidmore College up in Saratoga Springs, and I had to pick a major, and there were a lot of have-tos, but by the end of that first year, I was like, the only thing I want to do is study history. That's what I wanted to do. And so I chose to be a history major. And because I wanted to do it, I devoured it. I loved it. I was all over it. And then in my sophomore year, I got interested in a business idea. I've never said this on a podcast, Kevin, so you're the first one who's going to hear this. And it has
great. That's what I'm
nothing to do with my current career.
Tell me.
Check this out. So my sophomore year of college, the Princeton Review rated Skidmore College the #1 pot smoking school in America. And by the way, I was myself not a particular pothead, but and I thought that was outrageous because I'm like, okay, yeah, there are a lot of stoners at Skidmore, but I don't think that we have any higher concentration than any other place. But a buddy of mine from high school, he read that in the Princeton Review, and he said, quote, he went Skidmore College, more like Smokemore College. And I said, that's really clever. And all of a sudden I wanted to do something, which is I wanted to start a brand called Smokemore College and see if I could sell t-shirts. All right. Mm-hmm. And the moment I wanted to do it, I started, this was like, early aughts, the internet, nothing, like there was no way to make t-shirts online and stuff. Like I had to find out how do you make t-shirts? Where do you go to them? How do you buy them? How do you get a design? And then I added to my history major, I started studying business because I wanted to learn how do you do business? How do you set up a little shop? And so I just think all the way back to there, like what has, like in just that instance, it was what I wanted to do, what I got lit up by, and all of everything else, the how to was driven by want to from the beginning.
What is there a catalyst of that? Did you see, like I testified to my parents, is that something you were exposed to early on, or you were allowed to do, or you just felt the freedom to do?
Mm-hmm. I don't map it on. On the top of my head, it doesn't. I think it was freedom. Freedom feels really good. Freedom to do something and to figure it out, because I can fast forward a little bit to later in college when all of a sudden now I was supposed to pick a career, right? The have to expectations were for me to go to law school or Wall Street. Mm. And in fact, the summer between junior and senior year, I went and interned at a finance place, right, to see what that's like. I talked to all the lawyer people. And I was just so attuned, even at 20, 21, at like the weight I felt in my chest. This, I don't want to. I don't want to. This is just, I could feel that the internal energy to go do it was just not there. And I was actually really dreading it. To have to make this choice. But I was also really feeling the pressure of like, you're graduating college. You just paid a ridiculous amount of money to go to a liberal arts school. And the explicit and implicit or kind of unconscious pressures were really strong, Kevin.
Well, I was going to
And
ask how conscious you were. I mean, talking about it now, I can talk about a lot of things with some clarity now in retrospect. But at the time, did I know I felt the pressure? I don't even know if I knew if I felt the pressure, but now I do. Did you then?
did I know that I felt the pressure then? Um, okay, so then we get to the next part of the story, which is I actually. So, Kevin, I say that all learning and awareness is the result of contrast. So, so if all you've ever done is drank 2 Buck Chuck, okay, 2 Buck Chuck is great. Then some terrible wine aficionado introduces you to something nicer, right? Or your microbrew friend for the first time introduces you to something that's not Busch Light.
Mm-hmm.
And for better or worse, Busch Light and 2 Buck Chuck don't cut it anymore because you know otherwise, right?
Yeah, ignorance is bliss, eh?
Ignorance is bliss, and all learning is the result of contrast. So as you asked that question, Kevin, now while I was searching, I knew that I had the assumption was the implicit. I have to go to Wall Street. I have to go to law school. I'm going to have to do this. I wasn't aware that I couldn't do it, right? I definitely knew that I didn't feel good about it. But that was all the awareness I had. But where's the contrast? The contrast is this, and just little trigger warning here because it's going to get like intense for a second, is in the night before Halloween, October of my senior year, my mom died rather suddenly of long-term complications of prescribed opioids.
Wow.
Yeah. And this was before the word there was no opioid epidemic. There was still absolute standard practice to drug the heck out of people with chronic pain. My mom was taking 12 Percocets a day for 20 years on top of everything else.
Okay. Can I interrupt real quick? I'm just incredibly curious that yesterday, I decided to go for a walk from my office. And instead of just going for my normal loop, I thought, I just read about a book that I would normally buy. Wonder if it's at the library. So I went to the library, started looking at that book and then some others. I was looking on my phone at, if you like this book, you might like this. I picked up a book by a lady with the word with King in her last name, like King Fisher or King something. And it had like 100,000 reviews on Amazon. It's fiction. I'm talking a fiction book. And apparently she's known for kind of having these fiction stories that then boom, have a point. The one I picked up and read the first couple chapters of last night, I know the end of the story because she said that at the end of the story, there's a preface at the end of the story. What she's hitting on is the opiate.
Barbara Kingsolver?
Yes. I picked it up and started reading it last night, and here we are. We'll call that divine. Okay.
It sure is. I love that kind of synchronicity. In fact, there might be some more divineness in this story because half of life is what drives you, and half of life is what just stumbles into you. We'll get to that too.
Just runs into you somewhere. So the night before Halloween, senior year, she dies. Long-term battle with opiates. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the point in this instance of bringing that up is, I sometimes think of family systems as a solar system. And those bodies in any solar system exhibit gravity on one another and completely influence each other's orbits. And usually, and especially in my family, my mother was the sun, right? And I'm not even saying that she was like a benevolent sun or like she was this radiant, amazing woman. She was many things. But I'm saying her force of gravity is what dictated the orbits of me and my sister and my stepfather and even my dad. Like her force, good and bad, was this absolute governing body or governing force of those lives and those orbits. And so my mom dies, and I was cast adrift. Besides being in a state of functional shock for months, those pressures to go to Wall Street or law school or whatever, they temporarily vanished. In fact, I'd say for everyone in the family, the whole solar system got disorganized. And so all of the explicit and implicit, the known and unconscious influences got completely undone for a little while, Kevin. And so this is when I talk about the contrast. The contrast was I went into this place of almost zero gravity. Both the combination of those lack of pressures and expectations, the lack of all the things that were being motivated by what I needed or not needed to do for my mother, and by extension, the rest of the family. Because I grew up in a divorced household, my dad and my stepfather they were like, they might as well be moons compared to the influence of my mother, right? Yeah. I was floating in this nothingness, and I got to very vividly realize I don't want to do the things that I thought I had to do. So this is life stumbling into you, right? Like, and I will go through countless things of these with you, Kevin, where what drives, we have to seize the thing. It's up to us as ambitious people to have the discernment and the will and the strength to seize what stumbles into us. But all of my great forward movements have been the result of good and bad things stumbling into me. So in this case, Mom dies. And here's a little story. I had spent my entire college career vigorously avoiding the art requirement because I had a very super insecure, fragile ego, and I was terrible at art, Kevin. I was dominant in academics, but in art, I was like, this is going to be terrible. So I finally have to take this art requirement in this semester where my mom dies. It's called Form and Space, and it was like a remedial sculpture class. But what was amazing to me was that 8 hours in the art studio passed by in a flash, where the same amount of time in the library working on my history thesis was purgatory. And I was like, whoa, I never knew this, but I love working with my hands. I love being physically present with my work. And inside this kind of zero gravity place of Mom having died, I said to myself, I don't know what I'm doing next, but I'm going to work with my hands. I had this total clarity about that.
Let me ask about contrast again, because you're talking about 8 hours in the art studio passed so fast, as opposed to time in the library researching history, though you initially went after history because it was an interest.
Correct.
Was it fine, in essence, until the contrast of art?
Yeah, I think that it was fine in contrast. And because, again, in contrast, I didn't know. Yeah, I was such an intellectual and academic kid for a lot of reasons, a very non-physical kid for a lot of reasons. I don't even think I knew the joy or pleasure that could come from embodied physical focus. And so that came to me. And then speaking of the next bit, this is where this is the preamble to everything I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But some friends invited my family out to Telluride for the winter break after my mom died, for an experience to just like rest, retreat, and grieve. Very generous experience. And while we're out there, they also say, we have this amazing massage therapist. We think you guys would really benefit from seeing her while you're out here. And I'd only gotten a handful, but I loved getting massages. And also, like, among my friends, I was the one who was known for giving like a good back rub, But that's really as far as it went. And I go to see this massage therapist, and I don't know anything, right? Now I know every kind of body work under the sun, and I'm an expert in the field. But at the time, I did not know that she was not only doing massage therapy on me, but she was doing some energy work and some cranial sacral. And I had this rather transcendent experience while I was receiving that work. And I had the only out of the blue epiphany of my entire life. And what I define as an epiphany in this case, or almost like a Joan of Arc moment, was there was an announcement in my head that wasn't my voice. That while I was laying on that table said, this is what you're supposed to do.
Wow.
It was undeniable, and it wasn't mine. But it was like an instant yes, an instant okay. I've never had one of those moments again. There's 100 million times in my life where I wish I could have had that moment again, but I had it at that moment. And I got off that table and I went back to my family. 2 months after my mom died, still in college, still with the general expectation that I was going to do Wall Street or law school. And I said, so when I graduate from my really expensive liberal arts college, I'm going to go to massage school. And they were like, what? Mm-hmm. But blessedly, the solar system was completely disorganized. No one in the family, besides no one having the authority, no one else was the sun, right? No one else was telling anybody else what to do, right? And they were like, okay, weirdest thing in the world, Karden could have said. And mind you, think about how this matches up with this proto idea that I want to work with my hands.
Yeah.
Right? And so the start of the journey to becoming what I do in the world and the mission that I'm on, the book that I've written, the platform that I have, the courses and the tens of thousands of people that I've influenced and helped all stem from that moment. And once I got to massage school, speaking of want to, God, I wanted it. It was so fascinating to me. I was like a fish in water, and I've just ceaselessly wanted to know more about how human beings work and how to help them heal on every level.
I want to ask about that. Did you ever make a t-shirt?
for Smoke More College?
Yeah.
Oh, in fact, I still have one, and I sold them on the green of Skidmore campus. And Skidmore was so shocked and appalled by my audacity that I was dragged in front of the student government body and censored. And I, grasped onto my First Amendment rights and continued to sell them anyway. So there are Smoke More College t-shirts out there.
That is beautiful. And now they'll sell. You can get one for $250 because there's only a few left. Go to
They're
Kardin
vintage.
Rabin. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to know that. Thank you. So right there, you go into massage school, you do art, find this interest, calling, whatever you would refer to it as, to work with your hands, get exposed to this massage therapist. And right there, interestingly to me, then you say, and you awoke this desire. This desire was awakened to understand how human beings work. I mean, that's a deeper dive than just saying I really got jazzed about making pottery, or I really figured out I dig giving people massages. Those were in essence methodologies for obviously a much greater work that you seem to have felt to some degree even then. Did you conceive of it then? Like, I'm going to go to massage school, learn how to do this body stuff. But to me, this is to understand. Did you have the feeling now to understand how human beings work, not just to have a job doing massages because it seems kind of cool and you're kind of a touchy-feely guy.
Right. It just so happened that at the end of the sophomore year, after the Smoke More College run, and by the way, not only had I sold the shirts, but I had actually started planning out kind of in a imitation of collegehumor.com at the time, which was kind of like a humorous blog site with paraphernalia, or not paraphernalia is the wrong word, with swag, with like gear, right?
Right.
I was like, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a fictional cannabis-based university online, and we're going to write funny stuff, and then we're going to sell swag. Mm-hmm. And I actually recruited some of my friends to be like professors. I started putting this whole thing together, dude. And at the end of my sophomore year, some other part of, I remember what happened. Okay. I'm sorry, Kevin, I forgot something. We got to take a detour.
This is what I want to know.
Okay. Because this is actually, I missed this part, and this is probably the most important part. Up until I was 19 years old, I was a monumental asshole. I mean that. Right. I was a mean person. I was a bully. I was controlling. I was so deeply insecure, so deeply hurt. And my only protective skills were humor and criticism, cleverness and intelligence. That's it. And I used them like a sword to try to get cool people to laugh and weak people to hurt. It was terrible. It'd be another episode to talk about the genesis of that protective pattern, but that's who I was. I was a total dick. It didn't help that I was from New Jersey. Okay. And
it's hard for me to hear that and not ask at least for the synopsis of what you see led you to being that guy.
So I grew up my mom was addicted to opioids, right? And my parents were separated, and my stepdad was at work all the time, and my mom and stepdad ran a business together. And so if she wasn't asleep because she was on drugs, she was at work. And so my childhood was of pervasive neglect. Not like poverty neglect. We had food, right? We had shelter. We had water. I had clothes. But the neglect of my existence, I did not matter at all, right? And so so even bigger
than like emotional neglect, it was really even just attention neglect. You were kind of a roommate.
I was invisible, right? And like the heart of the description of my kind of like one of the places that I've gone so many times in therapy is in tears on the floor in front of my couch, bored, alone, and in pain. So no one was there. Tangent, I was a severe and terrible asthmatic as a kid, largely because of the deep nervous system dysregulation I had because of the pervasive neglect and lack of safety. I almost died from asthma attacks multiple times. And on at least 3 occasions, I was home alone and had to crawl to the phone by myself at like 6, 7, 9 years old and call 911 to save my life.
Wow.
On times that my mom rushed me to the hospital in the 4-door red Toyota Tercel that we called the ashtray because she smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day with an asthmatic child, she would be smoking and tell me to put my head out the window as she rushed me to the hospital.
Priorities. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the domestic life. I have a very loving relationship with my father, but I only got to see him 2 weekends a month. And then my stepdad, that's another story, but not close for most of those early years. And so then because you're totally annihilated there, you're desperate to find friends, be cool in some way. And I wasn't cool and I wasn't strong, but I had this absolute agonizingly desperate need to be accepted, like so many kids do. And because I wasn't an athlete, right? And because I wasn't a nerd, because where did my niche come in? I was the absolute paragon of a poser. I just wanted to follow the cool kids. And I wanted to do anything I could, grovel in any way I could, to get table scraps of their attention and validation, the cool kids. And somehow I learned in like 6th grade that I was good at making fun of people. And I got really good at it. And what did I get when I made fun of people? I got people to laugh with me. At the expense of someone else, but that's not what mattered. What mattered was that high that I got, the attention that I got, the eyeballs I got. Totally unconscious, by the way. Meaning it's not malicious. It was like my little young teenage body had found a way to matter. And I've said this over and over again when we come back, this is total tangent into attachment theory. But the single most important form of nourishment to a growing and developing nervous system is attention. Attachment is attention. It's attuned attention. It's being seen, right? Yes, we want food and shelter, but being touched, being emotional needs. I mean, you have children, right, Kevin? You have multiple, right?
What's that?
You have multiple. How many kids do you have?
9.
Right, you have 9.
Yeah.
If you take it all away, how they're endless attention sponge, right? Dad, watch me dive. Dad, look at me. Dad, look at this funny sound. My daughter last night, she spent 5 minutes just showing me this sound she learned how to make with her mouth. So they hunt attention more than food.
Yeah.
By millions and millions and millions of a percent. And so you can imagine that a soul, a spirit, a nervous system, a brain, a human being who has been in the Atacama desert of attention.
Yeah.
The moment he finds any, or she or they finds any spigot, spout, source of almost vicarious attention for the primary attention that was never there, they will seize it with every part of them.
Yeah.
So what drives you? Actually, let's talk about this for a second, because I was thinking about this before the episode, Kevin. Remember how I said I wanted to talk about the shadow and the virtue of what drives you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every bloody person on this planet is in half driven, or largely or primarily driven until they become conscious, that whatever they've chosen gives them a second-hand version of that primary attention that they needed and never got.
Yeah.
And we call that validation, right? But that's such an abstraction. When I tell you, like, it's the heroin that they're trying to get, that because they never got the actual love, they never got the actual seeing, the attention. So everyone needs to look at that shadow of what drives them.
I got a question for you on that. In attachment keeps coming up. I had Thais Gibson on the show.
Wonderful. Smart woman.
Smart woman. And I had not really dug into attachment. And so took her quiz, and it was incredibly on par with what I felt. And you just mentioned validation. I continue to struggle with the concept of validation, affirmation, whatever you want to call it. Seems like the cry. Everybody wants to be affirmed. And I struggle with the words, as I feel like we all have different perspectives on it. We have baggage around those, but looking at validation and affirmation and even attachment, and even as you say it here, and even as we look at attachment in a grander state, not just relational attachment, but attachment to the world and the external and to everything, to feeling like I don't know that I want an attachment to anything but my own authenticity. And I don't really want to need or really strongly desire validation or affirmation from anyone, that I want that internally. Not that I don't appreciate it. Feels good. It's a nice dopamine hit, and it can give you a rudder of where you're at, how people are experiencing you. But man, I struggle with it. And to speak against validation and affirmation, especially in the psychological world, seems to hit everybody differently. So with that said, thoughts?
Your longtime profession and passion was competitive cycling, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever worked with a competitive cyclist, trained a competitive cyclist who was like a natural and was really good at things and really good at the sport, but because they failed to learn maybe a fundamental skill or component of a certain kind of biking, certain kind of pedaling, I need you to help me out here. Something that you would have learned in the ABCs, but they got really good, but kind of skipped B. And then that kind of put a plateau on their performance, and they had to go back and learn something that most people learned 15 years ago. Can you relate to what I'm saying here in any model, whether it's cycling or otherwise?
Karden, that's a soapbox of mine. Yeah, really. The concept. Can I relate? No, I'll tell you real fast. This came up in a show recently because somebody was talking about art or music or something like that. Because of my experience as a cyclist, as a pro cyclist, and then being involved, gosh, I lived in Nashville, Music City, and the singers and songwriters, and I got to be a part of a lot of that, and now seeing other people in other professions. I have a feeling that the people who are the best athlete ever, the best artist ever, the best whatever, we'll never hear from, because they didn't learn something. They could never quite bring it to pass. And so we get to hear, and I feel it's maybe a myth that we know the famous people and they become famous because they are the best. I don't know. They were really good, and they were able to put A through Z together enough to bring it, the actual best ones. So to answer your question, yeah, I saw people over and over, young guys who I saw, they're not this strong, but they just, holy crap, they should be winning. They could physically win the Tour de France, and even some aspects of mentally. And we and some of the guys I was with when we started talking about this, we knew they'll never do it. It's never going to happen, man. They can't quite put it together.
They can't quite put it together. And do you know why they couldn't put it together? In a particular incident, was it because of some lack of skill, or do you know what the missing piece was?
I wish I did some aspect of awareness, but I'm hoping that you help me understand something better.
Yeah. So I am gonna bring it back to attachment now, and see where I was trying to get. One of the things that drives me, and I even might have said this in our last interview, is that when I say I want to understand how people work, I'm obsessed with discovering the physics that govern all human beings. The physics, the fundamentals, the real foundations, which, as I like to say, the Newton's laws of motion are very simple. But those simple laws of physics create an infinite amount of complexity in the universe, right? It's just, and as you try to do something, it's Newton's laws of physics that tell us how to get a satellite to visit an asteroid, which is an exceptionally complicated thing to calculate, but it's based on a handful of very simple laws.
Okay.
we are getting closer and closer to understanding a lot of those simple laws for human beings. They manifest in a gabillion different ways, but those laws, no one is immune to them. So, when we talk about attachment, the physics dictate, biologically, instinctually, evolutionarily, divinely, that you require a certain minimum amount of attuned attention and attachment during your 1 to 5 developmental period. If you don't get it, you don't die, but the physics change. And instead of growing one way, you grow a different way. And the way I like to describe this is that if you can imagine a tree in the center of a field with no competition and no obstruction of the light, think about how that tree grows up towards the sun. Strong, straight, broad. Now, have you ever seen a tree growing out of the side of a riverbank?
I have a picture, Karden, of about a week and a half ago in Hawaii of one of the larger trees that I have seen growing sideways over the road. So it wasn't a canopy of leaves and branches over the road. It was this massive trunk that went over the road and went up. And I was looking at it going, how the hell did that happen?
How did it happen?
So yes.
It's amazing. It's exceptional. It's a testament to the force of life. But it was a much harder way to grow.
Yeah.
Right?
And to hold itself there, it would seem like.
Correct. And also, if certain forces are applied to it, it's going to break. Right? So if we imagine this tree growing out of the side of the side of the riverbank, it's going to grow parallel for a minute, for a couple feet, until it awkwardly makes this bend to try to get towards the sun, which is the attention.
Yeah. But I'm thinking of it now and think, it's amazing that it did that, but there's a cost.
Exactly. There's a cost. And so we are post-attachment 1 to 5, from 5 to 21, to go through a very different set of experiences, which were generally and traditionally called the rites of passage. And the rites of passage were the rites of passage that allowed a couple things to happen. One, for you to learn how to exist independently, unattached. But we're never completely unattached because we're a tribal species, right? But basically, you from 1 to 5, you need abundant, endless validation, more or less, etc. Okay. And then from 5 to 21, it's this incremental uncoupling from attachment. An incremental expansion of the amount of adversity, emotionally, physically, spiritually, that you can handle and be within your body without having to repress, suppress, disassociate, cope, or break.
Yeah.
And if all of those processes happen optimally, Kevin, then you are a human being who, will I ever say you need no affirmation or validation? No, I don't think that's true. But you don't seek it like a drug because you got the adequate amount of it. And then you went through the rites of passage to wean yourself off of it so that you are a fully autonomous, centered human being who knows his own needs, can follow his own path, can listen to his own heart call without the manipulations of needing to go get the attention you never got. Okay? And then you can also relate to your brothers and sisters in your community in a way that understands the collective, but also is really firmly in what Kevin's heart call is. So people, I'm going to just say Kevin, so those who then grow up to then form an opposite thing, I don't need anybody. I'm going to be a hyper individual. I'm not going to need any external validation. I'm still going to say that that's a coping pattern that requires your life force to maintain to make up for a deficit you had when you were a child. And in our trauma work, in our attachment work, the goal is to go back and fix what was, to go back and start to heal at the developmental stage that the breakdown happened. And by fixing the foundation, you then naturally need less affirmation, naturally need less validation, naturally need to seek outside satisfaction so much less. And you also don't have to hold up this construct of hyper independence either, which is energy consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So where I'm kind of saying is, when I'm like, has there been someone who hit a plateau because they actually skipped a skill and it never integrated, and therefore they could never be at all? The same with us. If you're trying to live your life without correcting attachment failures in young life, you can do it, but you're going to be consuming resources and having a lot of what drives you around compensating for something cracked and wrong in the foundation of yourself because of that developmental problem, that attachment wound. And we would advocate for going back to heal the attachment wound so that you can live easier and more energetic and more truly free today.
Yeah, if I commented fully on every place that I'm resonating with you currently in current life and pursuit, this would be a 5-hour show. I will just say that on what you talked about, going back, I'm in a project right now where we're talking about, everything that we experience in life, we interpreted, we attached meaning to it, usually unconsciously. Now in becoming conscious, in essence, and aware, that we can go back and reinterpret what happened. And a lot of it is realizing it wasn't about us. And I wanted to ask you, when you talk about post-attachment, and that we will always have or desire some levels of attachment, but we want to, graduate out of those. What I've been being schooled on lately is individuation, individuating, and even coming to the point of realizing there's multiple opportunities on the path of our lives to individuate from our parents or our upbringing, from our spouse, from our kids. And I had it brought to me even in regards to people who then find themselves parenting their older parents. There's another necessary. I hadn't brought that up. So as you talking about post-attachment, I've seen that. And am I hearing then you positing that missing piece from this would-be high performer is likely an attachment disorder?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have, on the people who are more poetic and beautiful in their language around this work, each one of these personal relational crises that we experience in adulthood are the gateway to going back in time, to rescuing, reparenting, and repairing an early part so that we can authentically and powerfully individuate even more. And so that from a place of secure and empowered individuation, we can then go back into relationship with this utter knowing of our needs, with this utter feeling of what it's like to pull, I call them harpoons, the harpoons of codependency out of us, and be like, whoa, now that I worked with that attachment injury, now that I have a sense of what my whole individuation feels like when I'm not governed by the fear of the withdrawal of my partner, in this instance where maybe my partner truly treated me like very unkindly and disrespectfully, and before, because of my codependent fear, I didn't bring it up, I washed it under the table, I internalized it, getting caustic resentment inside me. Because I don't have the harpoon of codependence fear in me and I understand what it means to be individuated, I'm able to then say to my partner, I really love you. And I will never accept you speaking to me that way again. And I can finally say that with power as opposed to rage. And I can finally say that with power and clarity instead of fear, because I've worked through both the attachment injury, which then gives me the capacity to individuate, which is part of the rites of passage, by the way. So it's kind of like you're healing the hurt, facilitating then the growth, and then you can actually be different in the world.
Man, Karden, thanks. I'm so grateful that we came to this. Again, I'm working on a project that I'll share with you at another point, but around that healing the wound back there. You said repairing, and that's where I said reinterpreting, because this concept of just go back, just tell a better story. I get the concept. I feel it misses the mark, and people can't quite grasp that because it feels so inauthentic. This happened. They felt this way, and they're just supposed to go paint it nicer. I feel like people don't resonate with that, and saying it in this way, as you have, healing the attachment wound, go back and repair it. And again, I'm on a tangent of saying reinterpret it, but I feel so much hope for myself and for others to be able to do that, as opposed to how I feel people perceive that adage that we give of just tell a better story. So I greatly appreciate the perspective and words that you've.
And it's a tandem process, Kevin. So rewriting your narrative is a really powerful prefrontal cortex executive functioning way of trying to heal yourself and improve your performance. But as I like to say, and this is why I invited you to the emotional cold plunging from our last interview, because they go together. And what do I mean by this? I will say that your cognitive brain is Mac OS, all right? But your emotional brain is more like Windows 95. And then your instinctual survival pain, suffering brain, your brainstem, is DOS. There are people listening to this who haven't even heard of DOS, Kevin, because that shows our age, right? What happened back in the day, especially in the 90s, if you tried to send a file from a PC to a Mac?
Yeah, it doesn't work. It
doesn't work.
I'm a little beside myself with you using this. The project I'm working on is a human operating system, and we're using the same concept that I've had a computer. I think it's even around here. It's an old MacBook, and until it dies, I'm going to use it. That's just kind of how I do with things with life. But at some point there was a program or an app I wanted to use, and it only ran on an OS that wouldn't even install on this old computer. It required new hardware and software to run this thing. And that's where I feel we hit a lot of these great messages in personal development and great concepts in therapy that it resonates, but we can't even install it here. It won't even run.
Correct.
So
that's where the bridge comes in, Kevin, is so you rewrite at the level of Mac OS, but that file, that instruction, that new directive is not making it deep enough into your body, because your body and autonomic nervous system does not speak Mac OS, i.e. words. It speaks DOS, and which is, i.e. in the words of Peter Levine, sensation, image, which is sense memory, okay, behavior, emotion, and I already said sensation. So those are very different programming languages. So when I'm going in and to repair an attachment wound in myself, which I'm doing right now, I'm going through another brutal cycle of repairing the attachment wound of feeling basically abandoned and annihilated, which sucks, by the way. I've done the cognitive rewrite over and over and over again, from the fact that, I was cared for to a certain extent. My parents, of their own volition, weren't trying to hurt me. I am loved now. Like, all that stuff's there, and all that's true. But the visceral memory of my body doesn't give an F about that. And so that's why we do somatics. We need to be able to go into the body, open up that same file of pain, and feel the pain. But to feel the pain in a new way, in a new supported way, so that the body can do what it does with loss and pain, which is grieve. Then if it can grieve, which is like saying, it's like if it can actually expunge the poison from the never healed wound, then you can start doing some real healing shit in that space on both that somatic level and that cognitive level. But it takes amazing psychic and physical strength to do that, because your body has been spending its whole life avoiding that place of pain, because its memory of it is from when you were a kid, when you certainly couldn't handle it. And so now as an adult, you're more equipped to handle it, but you still need support. You still need a therapist or a collective or ceremony or ritual. But last but not least, again, people of this day won't remember this, but remember, again, speaking of computer files, back in the day, you'd open a file, especially if it was like a template, and you'd start working in it. And then you by accident save it and be like, oh crap, I actually didn't want to save that. I wanted to duplicate it. I didn't want to mess up my original file. You remember messing up original files and you didn't have like undo back then? You couldn't go through 1,000 iterations, right?
Yeah.
When you double click in somatically into a memory of pain, but re-experience it with the right amount of support, clinically, collectively, ritualistically, and your body and autonomic nervous system re-experience it, but with support, love, integrity, power, transcendence, victory, all these words, you've reopened neurologically and somatically a file, and then you've closed it, and it saves with the new layers of positive experience integrated. That cannot be done from the top down only, period.
It resonates so much. Karden, I mean, this is I didn't expect this in this discussion with you. So,
well, this is what drives me, Kevin. I'm obsessed with this stuff.
Well, is it somewhat fair? It's actually an elementary question, because I would think that to some degree, this is the answer for everybody. If they are, again, to use that word, aware and conscious, and going forward towards what they're really drawn to, that it's going to encompass their personal story. Matter of fact, Rory Vaden, a business guy, I don't know if you know Rory, working with a lot of big names, and he had him on the show again recently, and he made a statement that I've repeated since then that is in essence saying you are uniquely equipped to serve the person you once were.
Let's put that on my tombstone. That's great.
Yeah.
And it's exactly right. Exactly.
So
right.
your journey brought you to the place of wanting to heal yourself. And I mean, just to fast forward, and here you are today, striving to help people heal themselves through the aspects of the journey that you experienced and are experiencing.
And are experiencing. It's certain. I'm in a whole new level up of my work because of the new cycle of pain that I'm going through. That's my Olympic training. And then it will be my nature and my dharma to use that and pass it forward. That's how it works over and over.
Let me ask about the pain you're going through. Is it because of a catalyst that happened? There's some stimuli that happened and woke that up? Or is it just the peeling back the layers, and as you do that, you can evolve and mature to take care of the next thing?
Nope, this one stumbled into me. I had a very unexpected, massive relational rupture with someone very important to me. And it was so intense and so bad that in like Claude Van Damme movies and like almost all like kickboxer movies. The Kickboxer is pretty good. But then he goes into early in the movie, like Rocky. It's all these things, right? He goes into the ring in the first half of the movie and gets his ass handed to him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But he was already supposedly pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. I'm really good at this stuff, Kevin. And pretty seasoned at it now after 21 years of trying. We didn't even finish the 19-year-old story. We'll see if we get back to that. 21 years of professional competitive training in this inside space. And I met, a new contender, a new boss of painful relational rupture in the present, which caused a reemergence of coping patterns that I had long forgotten and thought that I had successfully quelled and healed. And trying to, so I have been called in order both to reclaim my own center and self, but to also try to save this particular relationship.
Yeah.
Although that's now become almost secondary to the individuation, by the way, Kevin, because this has been, because this was a relational rupture that flew back into an attachment wound that I had not realized I had not successfully completed, especially because, by the way, despite all my skills, grief has still been a very, very scary territory for me. So the current place that I'm becoming fluent and capable in is grief. So yeah, the short answer to your question is that I tell people this all the time. Even in ourselves, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Meaning, I don't really encourage people to go looking for their repressed monsters unless those repressed monsters are clearly impacting their health or their life or their relationship. So
yeah, causing patterns that, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, no, this layer that's come up more recently has to do with the relational rupture, the age that I'm at, the skills that I have, and the wound that happens to be related to.
I do want to hear the 19-year-old story and redemption of being a jerk. I want to ask though, in regards to what you said some coping patterns came back that you thought you said quelled and healed. I actually wrote about this in my book. I'm not a therapist. It was just a perspective that was gnawing on me and it felt relevant. So I'll ask you your thoughts, and it's fine if you feel like they're off base. It's in the books, but we all write books and we wish we could rewrite them later. It was the idea of some of those things, let's call them your coping patterns, some of the wounds, the traumas, the whatever. You're old enough as I am to remember the CDs, and back when we could save to a CD, and the idea that I had, and I referenced it to songs. So I've got these old songs of my youth that are on that CD. And I struggled with the feeling in our industry of personal growth and whatnot, that you're just supposed to deal with them and eradicate them. They're gone. And I just wasn't seeing that happen with myself or with rock star therapists or anybody. I don't know that they're gone. They're still there. And you're stuck in them if that's all that are there. But if you would now go write some new songs and a new song list, you can listen to those and not listen to those other ones anymore, but they're still there. And mm-hmm. If something happens, you could fall back to those. And my premise was just write better songs and have a better playlist up here, as opposed to thinking that we eradicate those things. Because I just didn't know that I believed that we could actually divest ourselves of that stuff. We can evolve beyond it and function differently over here. Thoughts?
Correct. Okay. As stated. Analogy perfect.
Okay.
And what I would add is, as you grow and develop and heal, some songs you used to love, you don't like anymore. or some songs that used to pull at your heart or bring up nostalgia just have lost their grip on you. When we do good healing work of our past, the old tracks of coping mechanisms that we had to use just lose their allure. Like I just don't like Eye the Tiger anymore. I never thought I'd say that, but I don't like Eye the Tiger anymore. Can't believe it. It's just not my jam anymore. You know? So that can change. And then
Rocky will forgive you.
Thank you. And my girls love Eye of the Tiger, so it's back on the list. But I'd also say that, and remember that there's that famous quote, right? When essentially when the going gets tough, we don't rise to our expectations, right, or our aspirations. We fall to our lowest level of preparation. So the higher level of stress, the faster your brain is going to regress to its earliest tracks. Higher level of stress, higher level of danger, higher level of terrifyingly threatening and hurtful relational rupture. Your brain will regress to its earliest tracks. This is part of the physics, Kevin. This is why basic training in the military, they have to work really hard to retrain the basic track of, pissing your pants and running when you hear gunfire. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot to do that.
To relearn old habits. Yeah. I mean, the sports analogy, man, you spend a couple of years playing tennis with bad form. To learn good form is so difficult.
Yeah.
So hard.
So hard. So in this case, because the relational rupture was so intense, and again, I just think it was also my time to get the opportunity to heal at this level. The coping mechanisms of essentially like insane levels of anger and control and withdrawal all at the same time. And seeing it, like being this age and having my skills to be like, holy crap, I'm seeing all of this behavior, all of this communication, all of these thought processes of anger and hate and blame. And I haven't been bowled over or tsunamied at this level that I couldn't, moderate it or shift it in a long, in decades. So that's what I mean by what the coping mechanisms.
Well, I want to ask about that, Karden. Is there, because again, I just feel like everything you say is right in my wheelhouse of research and pondering and experiencing right now, that because I do get these, you said an epiphany, but these new revelations, my eyes are open to something finally. And I think I know that I had that message 10 years ago, or even worse. I had a person, and we talked about that topic 5 years ago, and I did a really great job. Apparently it didn't take at all, because here I am re-experiencing it and now getting hit like a ton of bricks. I wasn't ready for it. Kind of that, what's that old cliche, when the student is ready, the master appears kind of idea.
Correct.
So in hearing some of these things, I struggle sometimes to not feel frustrated with myself that it's taken me this long to get it. But hearing what you're talking about, because I've been pondering as well, that maybe I just didn't have, I wasn't evolved to that level. I didn't have enough training to deal with it. And I'm dealing with it now because I'm finally ready to that. So even as you are doing this for 20 years, that it's taking you 20 years to have the capacity to deal with this thing you're dealing with now, not to just give the crutch of, so it is what it is and it's all perfect and just how it should be. I don't know if I can always accept that, but there is some relevance to such.
There's relevance. It's humbling. It's human. It is the cliche of it being nonlinear.
Yeah.
And it's also, what you said about like, when the student is ready, the master will appear. And that's also very, very relevant. Like, I think Jung said like everything before 40 is just research, right? Like
somebody did. I know that
somebody did, because it's a good one, and I just absolutely know, we don't, although I actually think philosophers have, I just haven't read these books yet. I've studied a lot about development, but I haven't really studied a lot about what the 20s and 30s and 40s, like these further ripenings that you and I, that all human beings go to through each decade. And I would absolutely assume that certain ripenings, certain decades, certain age landmarks, certain experience landmarks, certain adversity landmarks finally prepare you to go deal with that which you weren't able to deal with in the past.
Yeah. I just appreciate that, because I feel we can get into the place of feeling like we're going to arrive. I'm going to transcend now and arrive at some point and levitate, and I won't have any problems from that point on. And I don't see it. I feel like we can do it in better health, but I still, it feels nonlinear, as you said.
Kevin, I'm with you. Like, if we could start a podcast or a club that was about, that paradox of, we want to be at cause, and we want to be at leadership in our life of, at least my choice is to develop, to learn, to evolve, to seize more joy and richness out of life. But one, to assume that joy and richness exclusively exists of positiveness is actually maybe wrong. Like, there's a sweet and tender and horrible joy or pleasure to grief. It's awful, but it's one of the most profound and deep and rich and juicy parts of the human experience. Very few people say that part of their self-development journey or goal is to be skillful and embodied in grief and suffering, right? But maybe it should be. Sorry.
No, I'm thinking of it. I'm one who has avoided it like the plague in very unhealthy ways. And now, as I embrace it and am more aware, and I hope more conscious, I don't know that I can wake up in the morning excited about diving into grief. Yet in dealing with it, there's a hope of learning. I almost wanted to say there's some aspect of a dopamine hit even there, of getting into it, knowing that there's something beneficial for me, not something horrific, which goes back to your emotional cold plunge. If I can sit there, know that there's not a saber-toothed tiger. I'm not, my physical well-being is not at risk here, and sit in it, then the hope is, I bet I can learn something from this.
Hell yeah. Why not tie your dopamine rewards to emotional suffering and transcendence, as opposed to just physical suffering? Like, exercise is physical suffering that gives you a dopamine reward, right? Competition is physical suffering that gives you a dopamine reward.
Yeah.
And the masculine oriented people, especially, and athletically oriented people, are very driven by that.
I did it before we got on the show. I went out and did a ride. I felt like going hard. And so for an hour, heart rate's at, hitting 180 plus, and nobody's making me do it. I'm sitting there doing it, suffering, because it just feels so damn good.
Yeah. Well, imagine you got this. Yeah. Imagine you got the same reward for going into sadness, grief, rage. I actually do. I've really started to excited? Depends. But determined and motivated to endlessly return into my interior ring and come out victorious and more whole by feeling suffering? Heck yeah. Are there times, by the way, Kevin, where where part of the physics requires companionship in that process? This is not a solo sport always. This is a team sport going in and healing. Period.
I am with you there. That's hard for me to admit, because I like my solitariness and to learn on my own a lot. And yet I've found myself, as I have been dealing with grief issues, reaching out somewhat just to make sure I'm sane, I think, and I'm tracking, and to get insight. And so I reach out more than ever for help me look at this. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. As you're doing now. I don't want to jump away from this, but I'm really interested in the 19-year-old story. Karden, I've got a friend who I think he was much older, in his 40s. And he admittedly says, my name was Jim and I was an asshole. And
Yeah.
I was about to lose my business partner and my wife. And I realized this is not working. He says, now I'm Jimmy and I'm not an asshole. And we all sat around together tailgating after a big ride. And some other guys shared, because they had just done a trip, that something happened, a stimulus, and Philadelphia Jim showed back up. And he about got escorted off a plane. And he sat there and there was laughter, but he says, that shocked me. I thought that guy was gone, back to our eradicated. So something happened, a stress, and he just lost his awareness, his consciousness, reacted. And it took him after the event, I don't know, half an hour or whatever, to realize the gravity of it. And another learning point. So the 19-year-old Karden,
super jerk. We talked about where his genesis was. That boy, desperate for that nutrient of attention, found it by being a dick. And my sophomore year, I still had somehow people that were my friends. I don't know why, but I had my little core group of friends. And we went to a party. I was driving, and I don't know, half an hour into the party, I was like, this party sucks, let's go. And my other friends who wanted to stay, but were used to my bulliness, were like, all right, I guess we'll go, you're all right, right? So they agreed to come. And a third friend, Alexis, didn't want to go. She didn't want to leave. And she wasn't coming. And so I can't remember if I told her she had to go, or I was like in my car and I was like, Sam, go tell Alexis it's time to go, and if she doesn't come now, I'm gonna leave her with a curt, right? And then like 2 or 3 minutes later, Alexis, with that perfect amount of alcohol to be righteously honest, ripped me a new one like you've never seen, Kevin. She's like, you're such a piece of crap. You're so selfish. You're such an a-hole. You don't give a crap about anybody. She just hit every note loud, righteously, in public, right? And even though externally I was firing right back and fighting right back, I remember this to the day. I described it. I would point to the back of my head, just like this, Kevin, with my left finger to the back of my head. There was a little man back there who knew everything she was saying was right. Everything. It just saw the truth over and over and over and over again. And also, I think the tender boy inside that I am, that is actually like extraordinarily caring and loving. This is why I also had those friends, because that part was still there.
Yeah.
Felt catastrophic amounts of guilt and shame at this accurate depiction of who I was. By the way, I don't recommend this as most people's revelatory moments. Most people's revelatory moments don't come in the moments like of some friend drunk and righteous with anger drilling into you about how much of a scumbag you are. But that's what happened. And long story short is that, again, I fought back. I defended the crap out of myself. But I couldn't stop thinking about it as I went to bed that night. And I woke up the next morning. And inside that truth and shame and guilt, I vowed that I did not want to be the person that Alexis described. I just didn't. And I didn't know what to do, Kevin, so I went to Borders, the bookstore. Actually, it wasn't even Borders. There was another one that was in malls that was smaller, but a decent chain. They're out of business too. Anyway, I went to the self-help section. And I picked up Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a classic. And I describe that book as if a 1930s door-to-door vacuum salesman had a baby with the Dalai Lama. This is the book that they would write.
That's beautiful.
And it has a propagandistic name from the 30s, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. But it could be called like How to Actually Care and Be Kind to People Such That You Have Relationships. Okay?
Yeah.
And I read that book cover to cover over and over again. And I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm actually going to look it up real quick. There's a quote in the book. Oh, there we go.
I was raised on that book, Karden. I have in the house, one of the bookshelves, we've got an old tattered copy that I paid the kids, my older kids at least, to read and like answer a quiz on that.
Really?
So family heirloom, yeah.
So just to say that the quote from the book that I wrote on my mirror, which I like to look at because of my shallow vanity back then, was by Stephen Grillette. I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good thing, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. And that became my mantra at that age. Then my dad, I asked him for support, and he recommended Alan Watts and Eckhart Tolle. And so it was in the midst of that introspection and learning that I became disenchanted with smoke more, because although that was a want and an ambition, it was totally out of alignment. And so that melted away. But that's where, at that age, right then and there, because of Alexis's destruction of me, and then that absolute, like, I want to learn how to heal and fix, and I want to learn how people work so that I can help them, really help myself. I don't want to be this monster. I didn't know anything about attachment. All this stuff that I described to you about how I became that way, I only learned 15 years later. But it didn't matter. At the time, I understood that I had an issue. I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be a better person. And I grabbed the resources that were available to me. And that was those books.
Does Alexis know?
Yes, she does. And she is thanked every couple of years.
Wow. So there begins your true journey.
Yeah, right there.
Towards here. What were key landmarks along the way, or destinations along the way? So you went and you did this that led to this, that led to this.
I'll do those things. So it was that, which led to then post mom's death massage school. Massage school, I was so, this was an entire new world of the body, of spirit, of education about how we work in the esoteric. I then said, I want to keep learning. And I actually lived in residence as a volunteer at Kripalu, which is one of the biggest centers for yoga and health here in the country. It's about 10 minutes from out my window right here. And back then they had an exchange program where you could volunteer and work, and they would give you room and board and teach you. And so I dove into Kripalu and studying yoga and various forms of Eastern philosophy and movement. But for those, basically for the first 10 years from like 22 to almost 32, 33-ish, I really devoted myself to physical health, to functional health, to structural health, to both the kind of energetic and physical aspects of the body, because I was a body worker and my career was in helping people get out of pain with body work and functional movement practices, cranial sacral, all sorts of things. But the thing that was going on behind the scenes that whole time for those 10 years is that I started developing really, really, really bad recurring chronic back pain, which in a very humiliating way was not responding to all of the skills that I had. No amount of Rolfing, no amount of deep tissue, no amount of cranial sacral, osteopathy, acupuncture. Each successive year, it just got worse. I had a powerhouse in Pilates that could, stop a bullet, and no matter how strong my core got, my low back was still in pain. And in fact, only got worse year after year after year. And I told you, Kevin, these things stumble into me, right? Like I've had this drive, but each quantum leap has been fortune, coincidence, luck. In the midst of 5 months of the worst unrelenting back agony I've ever had, I stumbled into this book, which is called Healing Back Pain by Dr. John Sarno.
Okay.
And let's just start with, again, fate is an interesting thing. I'm in all this pain. I've got all this expertise, all this arrogance. Not the cruel arrogance from when I was younger, but like the youthful arrogance of like, I know my shit, right?
Confidence. Yeah.
Confidence. I've been to a lot of really skilled people. No one's been able to help me. And so how is this little book that's as thick as my forefinger at the spine going to possibly help me, right? Moreover, if you look at the cover here, it's got like some piece of like, a generic picture that they bought off some website of a muscled guy's back. I'm assuming it's just going to have some exercises in it.
Yeah.
But Kevin, I had to go to the bathroom, and who wants to go to the bathroom without reading material?
Fair.
Right? So I bring this book with me, and instead of saying, hold a plank for 10 minutes, it says, are you an overachiever? Are you a perfectionist? Do you put other people's needs ahead of yours? Do you really not feel emotions? Are you in your head all the time? Do you feel like you repress things? He does two things at once. He actually assembles the personality profile or profiles that are likely to have chronic pain. So no orthopedic assessment, no nothing. Like, are you like this as a person? Wow. And if you read this book, it starts to fit like a glove. And you're like, whoa, this is weird. Yeah, that's me. Then what he does is he then does a very skillful job of pointing out the Swiss cheese in the arguments, logic, and supposed science of the orthopedic explanations of pain. And as someone who'd been immersed in this very deeply for 12 years and studied the heck out of it, and had really been bowing down at these concepts of structure and function, the moment John Sarno started to point out the inconsistencies, I'm no dogmatic idiot. I was like, whoa, no one ever kind of invited me to look at it that way or look at it that way. I'm like, oh crap. Whoa. Yeah. He makes a lot more sense than those other people I learned from. And in one fell swoop, two worlds completely swapped. This functional structural world that I'd lived in just got torn to pieces in this one guy's little book, and like torn to pieces for good. And now most modern research, neuroscience and pain science, has supported everything John posited back then. And at the same time, he points to psychological and emotional factors being the primary drivers of chronic pain.
Yeah.
And that leads us from 32 to now, which is where, once again, having found the new thing that explained how people work and how I could heal myself, this time not from being an asshole, but from my pain, which led into, that went into studying with the luminaries in this field of neuroplastic pain, TMS, psychosomatic psychophysiological disorders, to then realizing I need to go deeper. And that brought me to the field of trauma. And I became a somatic experiencing practitioner trained in Peter Levine's method and parts work, attachment theory, the whole nine. Like, I've just followed that thread deep into how human beings work, and connecting how human health is directly tied to brain and emotional function.
I keep threatening myself with another podcast or doing a series on dead influencers, I guess, amazing people that are no longer, because I just looked up Dr. John Sarno, and like so many of the continual books and threads I keep running down are by people who are no longer alive. Amazing to see their impact. And I make myself curious with that, with these older messages that we keep coming back to. This, where you are, how would you quantify where you are, what you're doing today? Question one. And do you feel kind of fulfilled, encompassed where you are? Or are you seeing a hunger continue to grow a certain direction?
My immediate thought when you asked the first question is, I'm a very satisfied guy. I have this term called, when I'm coaching people just about kind of life's purpose or what drives you, I invite them to identify what they think their dharma is, right? Mine is to help people in the most broadest of sense. The two particular ways that I'm really spend my time helping people is in the way we've been discussing through healing mind-body disorders and, healing self, soul, identity. But the cyclical satisfaction is, have you found a way in the world to apply your gift in a way that almost every time you do, you feel good?
Mm-hmm.
At every stage in my career, even though I didn't know everything, right? When I was doing body work, that was I was helping people. And it was enormously cyclically satisfying because I'd do body work or movement with people and they'd love it, or they'd improve, their pain would go down. They'd tell me how they could pick up their kids again. That cyclical satisfaction was always present. Also, the cyclical satisfaction of every year learning something new, every year getting a new skill or technique to bring to the table to get more cyclical satisfaction out of doing my dharma, which is helping the next person. So I have slotted in really since I was 22 into almost always doing things that in every moment of doing them, that'd be exaggeration. In mostly of doing them, like, God, I had a fulfilling day. God, I had a fulfilling day. God, I had a fulfilling day. Were there hard parts? Was the accounting annoying? Was the IRS bit annoying? Was that client who's upset with me annoying? Oh, of course. But was every day filled with me doing my dharma and feeling that direct cyclical satisfaction from helping? Yes. So I want to just say that, like, for anyone who's looking at their life, if you're not getting that, even if you haven't, quote, achieved everything you want to achieve, find a way to have those cyclical satisfaction every day. And I have that. And, but no, but I'm not done because I'm never going to be done learning all of these things. Right now, I'm in a new growth edge, right? Revolving around this new relational pain and grief and individuation. Somehow, some way, that's going to be informing my work in the next year or two or three. And last but not least, my ambition has to help as many people as possible. That's why the main reason I've gone from clinician to teacher, book writer, and quote unquote influencer is because I want to impact the world. Because I want to share what I've got.
Yeah. Well, I am grateful for your ambition. I have benefited from it. I am benefiting from it. I am honored to share it with others. Thanks for letting me take a walk through your story. I appreciate your thoughtfulness, your insight, and I have more I want to do with you. So we'll be back. For sure.
We're gonna dig in and leverage that resonance, Kevin.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. Well, till next time.
Till next time, have a lovely.
Friends, thanks for joining us on this drive. Again, that is Kardin Rabin. You can find him anywhere. Just type in at KARDEN RABIN. His book, along with Jennifer Mann, is The Secret Language of the Body. Got a comment or a question for Karden or for myself on this episode and the topics here, go to kevinmiller.co. You can connect with me there. I hope this episode helps you drive further and most of all, enjoy your ride.
Yeah.